Jai Jinendra. Welcome to today's class on Nav Tatva. We are on week 9 of this particular topic. Let's start with the prayers. We'll carry on with the subject. Namo Arihantanam, Namo Siddhanam, Namo Ayariyanam, Namo Vajjayanam, Namo Loe Sabbasahunam, Eso Panchanamukaro Sabba Pava Panasano, Mangalanancha Sabbesim Padmam Havai Mangalam. Namo Riyantanam, Namo Siddhanam, Namo Ayariyanam, Namo Uvajjayanam, Namo Loe Sabbasahunam, Eso Panchanamukaro Sabba Pava Panasano, Mangalanancha Sabbesim Padmam Havai Mangalam. Namo Arihantanam, Namo Siddhanam, Namo Ayariyanam, Namo Uvajjayanam, Namo Loe Sabbasahunam, Eso Panchanamukaro Sabba Pava Panasano, Mangalanancha Sabbesim Padmam Havai Mangalam. Veera Sarasura Surendra Mahito Virambuda Sanskrita Virena Bheta Swakarmanichayo Viraya Nityam Nama Vira Tirthamidam Prautmatulam Vira Shighoram Tapo Vire Sri Druti Kirtikanti Nichaya Sri Virabhadram Disa Kamthe Dhranendracha Sochitam Karma Kurvati Prabhustulya Manovrutti Parshanath Sri Estu Vaha Anguthe Amrutavase Laptitana Bhandar Shri Guru Gautam Samariye Manavanchita Fadatar. We have started this study of Nav Tatva several weeks ago. We looked at the names of the Nav Tatva, the importance of learning about the Nav Tatva, and the various relationship between Jeev and Ajeev. And we have at length looked at the various aspects of Jeev. And as I mentioned before, we will be coming back to Jeev again and again to go into more depth as we go along in the study of Nav Tatva. We then started looking at the Ajeev part of Nav Tatva, and as you will remember, we talked about the different elements which are all arupi, meaning not visible to the eye. It's dharmastikai, adharmasikai, akashistikai, and jivastikai, which is jeev, and kard, which is not astikai, but kard is time. And this week, today, we will start on with the topic of pudgalastikai. Now, the study of Pudgal is about the study of physics in many ways, according to what our Jain Sastras are teaching us. A lot of the concepts that I'm going to introduce today may be quite difficult, and in terms of relating this to what modern science says, you may find it quite difficult to understand because some of these concepts are not explored in science at all. And the way the relationship that is being mentioned between different materials and the qualities of matter are something which is going much beyond what modern science has actually gone on to discover so far. So there are aspects to this that you may find quite difficult to relate to. But let's start off with that, and I'm sure there will be lots of questions. We might need to spend a few weeks because I'm just doing an introduction to Pudgal today. There is a lot more that we'll go into the depth of. as we go along. Let me start sharing my slides. Everything that we see in the world, in the universe, that we can actually see is because of Pudgal. And it is due to Pudgal. So Pudgal is the only rupee visible dravya out of all the 5 astikai dravyas. That is Jivastikai, Dharmastikai, Adharmastikai, Akasastikai, and Pudgalastikai. Pudgal by nature has the quality of Puran, to join together, and Galan, to separate and disperse. Astikai, as we have discussed before, Asti means Pradesh and Kai means Samuha, meaning Astika is something that is produced as a result of the joining of parts. The parts, except for Pudgal, are all inseparable, as I mentioned, from the whole. So for Jivastikai, Dharmastikai, Adharmastikai, Akasistikai, the parts and the whole are one. They are joined together, but they are still, in terms of understanding, are saying that these are Astikai, meaning Pradesho no Samoha. Kal is not an Astikai. Pudgalistikai by nature has the ability to join up together, form larger bodies, and those are divided into different sizes. And let me just briefly introduce this part to you now. When we talk about matter, as I mentioned a few times before, the smallest particle of matter is something that modern science has been progressively devoting a lot of research efforts to discovering. And you all heard of uh, the huge experiments, and I'm not sure exactly where this is in. I think there is one research facility that extends over miles, which is trying to discover the smallest, or has discovered the smallest particle so far known. Uh, any one of you who might be familiar with this, just the name of that particular instrument has skipped my mind just now. But in terms of bombarding uh, protons, neutrons, electrons, and discovering and measuring the smallest particle, so actually created through these experiments, Jain Dharma describes the smallest indivisible particle. And as I mentioned last time, the smallest particle that, through the knowledge of Keval Gnan, of a Kevali Bhagwant, of Tirthankar Paramatma, the smallest indivisible particle is named as a Parmanu. That is, it cannot be divided further below that. So Pudgal is ultimately made up of Parmanu, but when Parmanus get together, then there are different names given to the combined units. જૈન દર્શનમાં પૂતગલોના સૂક્ષ્મ સ્વરૂપની થી સ્થૂળ સ્વરૂપ સુધીનો વિચાર બરાબર કરવામાં આવ્યો છે. તેનાથી નિર્મિત થતા શબ્દ, અંકાર, પ્રકાશ, કાંતિ, છાયા, આતપ વગેરેનું પણ વિશદ વર્ણન કરેલું છે. જ્યારે now this starts with the reason why we study Pudgal is to try and understand what karma is, because karma is a Pudgal. Pudgal can be minuscule and exist as a Parmanu, that is the smallest particle, and it can exist in bigger units called skand. And a Parmanu is something that cannot be seen or measured by even the most sensitive instruments. When one Parmanu joins up with another Parmanu, then the combined unit is called a skand. That is the smallest unit of two Parmanus. However, anything bigger than, so 2 units is skand, 3 units is skand, 4 Parmanus is skand, and you can go on with asankhya, meaning countless numbers of Parmanu joining up together, and they are all called skand. અસંખ્ય પરમાણુની અસંખ્યાણુક અને અનંત પરમાણુનો અનંતાણુક બને છે. આ બધાએ સ્કંદના પ્રકારો હોવાથી સ્કંદની સંખ્યા અનંતા અનંત છે. Meaning પરમાણુ, the smallest individual particle, can join up with others, similar particles, and become larger and larger, and can go on to anant skand, which has anant parmanu. How long can a skand last? So once Parmanus come together to form a skand, Jain Shastras say that a skand can last for a minimum of one samay, which, as we know, is the smallest unit of time. And it can exist for millions of years and even countless number of years. But ultimately, a skand that is a combination of 2 Parmanus or more will again separate out as Parmanus. મધ્યમથી લાખો કરોડો અબજો વર્ષ સુધી ટકે, ઉત્કૃષ્ટિ અસંખ્યાત વર્ષ સુધી ટકે, પરંતુ ત્યાર પછી તેનો નાશ થાય અને તે છૂટો પડી અણુ પરમાણુના રૂપમાં આવી જાય. So ultimately, matter in the visible format that we see ultimately come apart as individual Parmanus, and that can happen after millions and millions or even billions of years. આવા અણુ પરમાણુ ફરી પાછા ભેગા મળે અને તેનો સ્કંદ થાય. આમ પૂતગલમાં ભેગા થવાની અને છૂટા પડવાની ક્રિયા થયા જ કરે છે. તેથી શાસ્ત્રકારોએ તેનું પૂતગલ એવું ગુણ નિષ્પન્ન નામ આપ્યું છે. That is why it's called પૂતગલ, that it has got the ability to come together and separate. And that is the nature of matter. And that is why all the things that we see around us and all the bodies of living beings that we see are all made up of pudgal of different types. However, we need to understand that we are talking about different combinations of Pudgal that come together to form units and things out of that, or bodies out of that. But a Parmanu is not created. So the universe is full of an infinite number of Parmanu that are packed together throughout the universe, but no new Pudgal Parmanu is being created. So everything that we see around us changing is as a result of Pudgal Parmanu coming together as skans and forming different types of bodies and then dispersing. So that is the nature of Pudgal. Now, as far as skand is concerned, those which are sukshma parinami, meaning those which are very minuscule or very small, cannot be seen with the naked eye. So those are called sukshma parinami. And those which are larger, which are called badar parinami, those can be seen with the eyes. Now, when similar skans, sajatiya, meaning when there are skans which are of a similar nature and similar characteristics, when they come together, then those units are called vargana. And we'll learn more about the different varganas next week. But briefly, a vargana is something that our bodies use. So there are varganas which are called Audarik Sarir Grahan Yogya Vargana, Mahavargana. That is those particles of matter, that material that can be used to maintain and build up a body like ours, which is called an Audarik Sarir. Then there are Varganas which form the thoughts that go on in our mind. There are Varganas which create the words, the speech that we speak, the noise. And then there are Varganas that form the karmas that the soul attracts, and those then incorporate and attach to the soul, come together with the soul, and show their effects either soon after they are formed or at some time in the future. We'll talk more about Varganas next time, but let's go back to some more qualities of Pudgal. Now, the qualities of Pudgal, here you see that there are 6 different qualities that are being described. Sabda, Andhakar, Udyot, Prabha, Chaya, and Atap. Sabda is sound, that is sound or noise or music, etc., divided into Sachit. So that's Sabda that is produced by a life form. Achit is when two pieces of material strike each other, meaning, say, if two stones come together and we hear a sound, or when one stone is thrown against another one and the sound that is produced. So, Sabda there is Achit, and Mishra, meaning, say, for example, a person or an animal uh, producing music or using an instrument that produces sound. So Sabda is produced from Pudgal and by itself is Pudgal in nature. So Dharma says that sound, noise is Pudgal in nature. Andhkar, darkness itself is described as Pudgal in Jain Sastras. It's not the absence of light that produces darkness. According to our Sastras, darkness itself is a manifestation of Pudgal. Udyot, cold light of heavenly bodies like the moon, stars, etc., etc. Some jewels also produce kind of cold light. All that is Pudgal and is produced from Pudgal. Prabha. So the example that's given here is that if you got the sun shining during daytime, if you are not under any shade, you got bright light. But in the area, say under a shade, there still is light. So not direct light, but uprakash surrounding the area covered by direct light is Pudgal and produced by Pudgal. Chaya, the reflection in a mirror and shadows are by nature Pudgal. Now, these are concepts that are not familiar to us, but some of you who may have uh, looked at some old stories about ghosts and things like that, and some ancient stories in English literature which relate to extra sensory perceptions, mention uh, something similar to this. So, shadows being made up of Pudgal, reflections in the mirror being made up of Pudgal. Atap, the heat giving light of bodies which themselves are cold. So Jain Dharma says that the sun itself, the Pudgal that makes up the sun, the type of life that makes up the body of the sun, themselves are cool, but the light that they give out has got the property of heat. So heat giving light of bodies which themselves are cold, like the sun and jewels, Ratna, like Suryakant Mani. So Suryakant Mani is a kind of a jewel, the light of which is actually hot. Atap is itself Pudgal and comes from Pudgal. The hot light of a fire is not called Atap because the fire itself is hot. Going further into the qualities of Pudgal, they're further divided into colors, smell, ras, and spars. So, Varna, Gandh, Ras, and spars. There are 5 colors, 2 smells, 5 tastes, and 8 spars and combinations of this. But these are the basic uh, classification of these 4 different areas. Each Parmanu has one Varna, that is color. So it could be Swet Varna, that is white, Pit Varna, that is yellow, Rakt Varna, that is red, Nil Varna, that is green, and Krishna Varna, that is black. These are the base colors. All other colors are derived from these 5 by variations in intensity of mixture of colors. Each Parmanu has one Varna color. Smell, that is Gandh, 2 smells, Surbigandh and Durbigandh. Each Parmanu has one Gandh, that is smell. Ras, or tastes. 5 tastes: तिक्त, तीखो, hot; कट्टू और कड़वो; कषाय और तूरो, bitter; आम्ल और खाटो, that is sour; मधुर or मीठो, that is sweet. Kharo ras is also described, but this is incorporated in Madhur ras and is a quality of Pudgal, and each Parmanu has one of these 5 ras. Sparsh, nature of the surface to touch, that's how I understand it. 8 different spars: Sit, that is cold; Ushna, that is hot; Snigdh, that is smooth; Ruksh, that is hard or rough; Lagu, small; Guru, big; Mrudu, soft; and Karkash, rough. All Pudgal has either Sit and Snigdh, or Sit and Ruksh, or Ushna and Snigdh, or Ushna and Ruksh spurs. So such a combination of two. In very small combinations of Parmanu, Sukshma Parmanu Parinami Skand, these 4 spurs of Sit, Ushna, Snigdh, Ruksh exist, and in large combinations of Parmanu, that is Badar, Parinami Skand, all 8 spurs exist. So Jain Dharma, Nav Tatva, and other texts describes the qualities of Pudgal as such. So again, to summarize, Pudgal is everything material that we see around us, and we can recognize the qualities that are being mentioned here. And what we see with our naked eye is all Badar Parinami, meaning large skand, things that have come together in larger numbers of Parmanu. And we are not talking about skands of small units, of small numbers of Pudgal Parmanu. We are talking about huge numbers, which are then called Varganas. And those Varganas are of an infinite different types, but about 16 different Varganas are described. And I'll just briefly read those out to you. સજાતીય અનંત પરમાણુઓ ભેગા થાય એને વર્ગણા કહેવાય. સજાતીય meaning those which are similar in nature. So out of all these different qualities that we see, Parmanu of similar nature, when they come together, then they are called Varganas. And there are an infinite varieties of Vargana, out of which there are 16 which are important and which are of relevance. We'll come to more of this next week, but very briefly, this is how they are described. औदारिक शरीर माटे अग्रहण योग्य महावर्गणा, meaning those mahavarganas which are not useful for an Audarik Sarir. Audarik Sarir is the bodies like ours, like those of animals, which are dependent on, food and water, which is then converted into building up that body. Those are called Audarik Saris. Audarik Sarir mate agrahan yogya. So those which are not suitable for forming that kind of a body. And then there is an Audarik Sarir Grahan Yogya Mahavargana. So those Mahavarganas or that matter which is suitable for use or to form bodies like ours. Audarik Vaikriya Sarir mate agrahan yogya Mahavargana. So those chunks of matter which are not suitable for forming either an Audarik Sarir or a Vaikriya Sarir. A Vaikriya Sarir is the kind of body that Devs and those lives in Narak have by nature, by their birth, and an Audarik Sarir, and a Vaikriya Sarir. So Vaikriya Sarir is the kind of body that Devs and Narak have by virtue of their where they are born. But Vaikriya Sarir can be formed by people who have developed a particular power of which is called Vaikriya Labdhi. Vaikriya Sarir Mate Grahan Yogya Mahavargana, that is the fourth type. So one which is not suitable for forming either Audarik or Vaikriya Sarir, and those which are suitable for forming a Vaikriya Sarir. Then Vaikriya અને આહારક શરીર માટે અગ્રહણ યોગ્ય મહાવર્ગણા, આહારક શરીર માટે ગ્રહણ યોગ્ય મહાવર્ગણા. That is the sixth. આહારક અને તેજસ શરીર માટે અગ્રહણ યોગ્ય મહાવર્ગણા, and તેજસ શરીર માટે ગ્રહણ યોગ્ય મહાવર્ગણા. Now, around the soul, we got the Karman Sarir, then we got Tejas Sarir. Tejas Sarir and Bhasha. So Tejas Sarir is the body that is also formed around the soul. Tejas Sarir and Bhasa Mate, and that is the sort of Tejas Sarir is the body that helps or gives the energy. તેજસ શરીર અને ભાષા માટે અગ્રહણ યોગ્ય મહાવર્ગણા, ભાષા માટે ગ્રહણ યોગ્ય મહાવર્ગણા, ભાષા અને શ્વાસોશ્વાસ માટે અગ્રહણ યોગ્ય મહાવર્ગણા અને શ્વાસોશ્વાસ માટે ગ્રહણ યોગ્ય મહાવર્ગણા. શ્વાસોશ્વાસ અને મન માટે અગ્રહણ યોગ્ય મહાવર્ગણા અને મન માટે ગ્રહણ યોગ્ય મહાવર્ગણા. મન અને કર્મ માટે અગ્રહણ યોગ્ય મહાવર્ગણા અને કર્મ માટે ગ્રહણ યોગ્ય મહાવર્ગણા. Now, progressively, all these varganas are more and more dense. So, starting from the Audarik Sarir Agrahan Yogya Mahavargana and progressing on to Karma Mate Grahan Yogya Mahavargana, these are more and more dense, but more and more finer, so those are less visible. And Karma Vargana are not visible at all. Man Vargana is not visible. Sasoswas Vargana is not. Similarly, Basa Vargana is not. Let me just read this short paragraph. ઔદારિક શરીર માટે યોગ્ય વર્ગાણાના સ્કંદોનું સ્વરૂપ નાનું થાય અને તેમાં પરમાણુઓ વધારે હોય તો તેનું ઔદારિક કે વૈક્રિય શરીર બની શકે નહીં. એટલે તે ઔદારિક તથા વૈક્રિય શરીર માટે અગ્રહણ યોગ્ય કહેવાય. એનું કદ નાનું થાય અને પરમાણુઓની સંખ્યા વધે ત્યારે તે વૈક્રિય શરીર માટે ગ્રહણ યોગ્ય થાય. So progressively each of these 16 that I just mentioned are denser and denser than the previous one. આહારક શરીર, તેજસ શરીર, ભાષા, શ્વાસોશ્વાસ, મન અને કર્મની વર્ગણાઓને માટે પણ આમ જ સમજવું. પરમાણુઓની સંખ્યામાં વધઘટ થવાથી અગ્રહણયોગ્ય વર્ગણાઓ બને છે અને ગ્રહણયોગ્ય વર્ગણાઓ અગ્રહણયોગ્ય બને છે. એટલી વાત લક્ષમાં રાખવી. Now, I'll stop here. I've introduced a large number of new terms here. Some of you may be familiar with these terms and may have heard of them before. Some of you may have come across these concepts as well before, but for many of you, I'm aware this will be very new. And I'm sure you all have lots of questions. Those of you with a scientific education and background may have a lot more questions than others in trying to relate this to what we've learned in science. So I'm now going to stop and ask you to ask questions. So there's a message from Sandeep. The quark is the smallest known particle so far. The Hadron Particle Accelerator, that's the word I was looking for. Thank you, Sandeep. In Switzerland is very long and is used to discover these particles. So far, it is the quark that we are looking at. And then I think there were, what are the other particles? What is bosons? Something like that, bosons? Sandeep? Okay, fire away. Any questions? You may ask, why is this important? If we are studying Nav Tatva and we are trying to understand the soul, understanding Udgal, that is what surrounds us, what we lay our faith in, what we attach our likes and dislikes to, and how we recognize things and people and ourselves and how what we identify with is very important. Understanding the nature of the material world in its ultimate form and its various aspects is important. And we are learning about this because ultimately it takes us to the study of karma, pudgal, and the nature of karmic particles and the various rules that govern the formation of karma and their ultimate effect on the soul. Okay. Sandeep has put something in. What is a neutrino, Sandeep?
It's one of the other smallest particles as well.
There are quite a few others, aren't there?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. All right. So the Hadron Particle Accelerator is where they're discovering more and more particles. But
Yes.
according to Jain Sastras, no matter how much effort is made, the smallest particle as described in our Shastras, the Parmanu, is not going to be discoverable by scientific endeavors. Okay.
Mm.
Okay, any questions? How many of you have actually come across many of these words before? Just a show of hands. Nilma?
I've not come across that before. It's completely new and it's taken me by. So I'm quite shocked by it because there's too many new terminologies and
There's too many new words. Okay.
I heard about it. પણ અજીતભાઈ આપણે કઈ શબ્દને ઓકે વર્ણ આપણને દેખાય છે, રસ આપણે ટેસ્ટ કરીએ છીએ, સ્પર્શ આપણે ટચ કરીએ છીએ, તો ગંધ અને શબ્દ ને એ બધું કેવી રીતે પૂતગલ લાગે? પૂતગલ એટલે તો એને કઈક હોવું જોઈએ એમ, લાઈક સોલિડ થિંગ.
One way of understanding this is, for example, what is it that our noses pick up? So if you look at what we can smell and what others can smell, what is it that they pick up? So those are not visible, but the difference between one smell and another and identifying different smells is the function of the sense of smell, that's the nose. Different people have different capacities for that. Certain animals have a much greater capacity for smelling out different things. So they are basically picking up those particles which carry those particular qualities that can then be identified. So I think the smell is probably an easier concept. Somebody's got their something on the background, or a radio or something playing, or television.
I think it's coming from Jayshree Ben. I've just muted her.
Oh, okay. All right. So Jayshree, smell is probably an easier concept to understand as being made of matter. But the other concepts of, say, chaya, reflections, shadows, atap, all those things are probably a bit more difficult, and we may not be able to relate to that if you are just going by what science has so far discovered. So Nilma, these concepts are completely new to you. I'm sure all of you have had some level of study of physics and chemistry in school. In terms of materials and matter, because we never thought of some of these things as material or matter. So for example, shadows we consider as absence of light. Yeah. But what our Shastras say, and this is something that you may sort of, if those of you who are interested in reading ancient literature, and if you, I think, explore some English 17th, 18th century English literature, you might come across some concepts which talk about similar things. So અંધકાર એ પણ પૂતગલ રૂપ છે. શાસ્ત્રમાં અંધકારને ધારણેન્દ્રિય ગ્રાહ્ય કયો છે. ધારણેન્દ્રિય ગ્રાહ્ય એટલે શું? અંધકાર means darkness is actually something that can be sensed by the sense of smell. Now, our Shastras have said that if you are, say, got your eyes closed and there is a shadow, then your sense of smell may be able to actually discern a shadow. Andhakar, not shadow. It can be discerned, the darkness can be discerned by the sense of smell. અંધકાર એ પણ પૂતગલ રૂપ છે. શાસ્ત્રમાં અંધકારને ધારણેન્દ્રિય ગ્રાહ્ય કયો છે. ન્યાયિક વગેરે અંધકારને પદાર્થ માનતા નથી. So again, talk about scientific understanding. Naiyayic is another kind of philosophy which is similar to what modern science is preaching, talking about. They do not accept that darkness, andhkar, is matter. Matra trejno abhav te andhkar, meaning absence of light is darkness. એમ અભાવ રૂપ માને છે, પરંતુ શ્રી સર્વજ્ઞ પ્રભુ તો અંધકાર પણ પૂદગલ સ્કંદ છે એમ કહે છે. તે જ સત્ય છે. પૂદગલ સ્કંદ એટલે ઇટ્સ એકચ્યુઅલી મેટર. It is formed of combinations of parmanu. It's a skand. That is what andhkar or darkness is. ઉદ્યોત, શીત વસ્તુનો શીત પ્રકાશ તે ઉદ્યોત કહેવાય છે. સૂર્ય સિવાયના ચંદ્ર વગેરે જ્યોતિષ દેવોના વિમાનોનો, આજ્ઞા વગેરે જીવોનો અને ચંદ્રકાંત આદિ રત્નોનો જે પ્રકાશ છે તે ઉદ્યોત નામ કર્મના ઉદયથી છે. તથા એ ઉદ્યોત જેમાંથી પ્રગટ થાય છે તે પૂદગલ સ્કંદો છે અને ઉદ્યોત પોતે પણ પૂદગલ સ્કંદ છે. Meaning, those are particles of matter. પ્રભા ચંદ્ર વગેરેના પ્રકાશમાંથી અને સૂર્યના પ્રકાશમાંથી કે બીજા કિરણ રહિત ઉપપ્રકાશ પડે છે તે પ્રભા પૂદગલ સ્કંદમાંથી પ્રગટ થઈ છે અને પોતે પણ પૂદગલ સ્કંદોનો સમૂહ છે. જો પ્રભા ન હોય તો સૂર્ય વગેરેના કિરણોનો પ્રકાશ જ્યાં પડતો હોય ત્યાં પ્રકાશ હોય. So પ્રભા, so for example, what it says that if you got rays of the sun falling on a place, then particles from those rays light up the surrounding area where they are not actually falling directly. So those are called prabha. Therefore, if you are standing under the shade of a tree in broad daylight and the sun is bright outside the shade of the tree, the area under the shade, under the tree, is not actually completely dark. So the day is lighted by the presence of sun rays, but the area where sun rays do not actually fall directly is also light or illuminated, and that illumination is called prabha. Chaya is darpanma અથવા પ્રકાશમાં પડતું જે પ્રતિબિંબ તે છાયા કહેવાય છે. બાદર પરિણામે સ્કંદોમાંથી પ્રતિ સમય પાણીના ફુવારાની જેમ. So what it says is that બાદર પરિણામી, those combinations of matter, parmanu, which are large, therefore they are visible, they are called badar parinami. સ્કંદોમાંથી પ્રતિ સમય, so every moment, પાણીના ફુવારાની જેમ નીકળતા 8 સ્પર્શી પૂદગલ સ્કંદોના સમુદાય જ પ્રકાશ આદિના નિમિત્તથી તદાકાર પીડિત થઈ જાય છે. So every material is constantly shedding. બાદર પરિણામે સ્કંદોમાંથી પ્રતિ સમય પાણીના ફુવારાની જેમ is shedding like a shower of water. 8 સ્પર્શી પૂદગલ સ્કંદો, so it's shedding of small particles જે પ્રકાશ આદિના નિમિત્તથી તદાકાર પીડિત થઈ જાય છે તે છાયા કહેવાય છે. So every body that throws a shadow, it's because the body is actually throwing off particles into the surrounding area, and where પ્રકાશ આદિના નિમિત્તથી તદાકાર પીડિત થઈ જાય છે. So where there is a light coming from one angle and in front of or behind a body, then the body itself is showering off other particles which then appear as the shadow of that particular body. અને પૂર્વ કયા પ્રમાણે શબ્દાવિત બંને રીતે પૂતગલ રૂપ છે. And શબ્દ, Jayshribin, your question was, શબ્દ એટલે અવાજ, ધ્વનિ, નાદ એ સચિત, અચિત અને મિશ્ર એમ 3 પ્રકારનો છે. જીવ મોંથી બોલે છે તે સચિત શબ્દ, પથ્થર વગેરે પદાર્થના પરસ્પર અફડાવાથી થાય તે અચિત શબ્દ અને જીવ પ્રયત્ન વડે વાગતા મૃદંગ, ભૂંગળ આદિના મિશ્ર શબ્દ. શબ્દની ઉત્પત્તિ પૂતગલમાંથી થાય છે અને શબ્દ પોતે પણ પૂતગલ રૂપ જ છે. હવે નૈયાયિક એટલે અગેન સાયન્ટિફિક શબ્દને આકાશથી ઉત્પન્ન થયેલ અને આકાશનો ગુણ કહે છે. They say that it is sound or noise is something that has been produced from space. પરંતુ આકાશ અરૂપી છે અને શબ્દ રૂપી છે. તેથી શબ્દ એ આકાશનો નહીં પણ પૂતગલનો ગુણ છે. પૂતગલનું એક જાતનું એ પણ સ્વરૂપ લક્ષણ છે. શબ્દ પોતે જ 4 સ્પર્શવાળો છે અને તેની ઉત્પત્તિ 8 સ્પર્શવાળા પૂતગલ સ્કંદમાંથી જ હોય છે, પરંતુ ચતુસ્પર્શી સ્કંદમાંથી નથી. So sound, noise comes from Badar Parilami, means large particles, and in itself Sabda or noise, sound has got 4 spurs, meaning it has got a material characteristic. Okay. The idea of Varna, Gandh, Ras and Sparsh is something that is easier to understand. Okay. Any other questions?
So Ajitbhai,
Mhm.
is this something obviously is not logical? We just have to believe because it's in our Shastra.
It's not logical from the limited scientific knowledge that we have so far.
Okay.
So if you are talking about this of whatever we've discovered, science has discovered in the last 100 years,
Mhm.
200 years ago, none of that could have been considered logical. We accepted that because we've seen the physical evidence of all that. So the problem is that we only accept and believe what we see physical evidence of,
Mhm.
and ultimately we are talking about all these concepts, most of which are arupi, meaning they do not have visibility. We ourselves as Jeev are arupi. If we say that I cannot see myself, therefore I do not exist, if somebody, and that is a question that a lot of people will ask, that what happens if you say that the soul exists, then what happens to the soul when somebody dies? And there is a particular story that relates to this particular incident. There was once a king who went to a great acharya and said, after listening to the sermon, the pravachan, talking about the soul and the idea that good deeds will take you to happier places in Devlok, bad deeds will take you to places of punishment like Narak, and that there is something beyond Swarg and Narak and Manushyalok where the soul goes to when it is free from karma. So this king says that I do not believe in any of these concepts because I was asking myself these questions, and I was experimenting. Once I had a person who had committed a crime, and the punishment for that crime was that he is uh, that he is not allowed to live. So there was a way. He said that rather than hanging, he put him in an iron box, the live person, completely sealed from all sides. So nothing can actually go inside. And that particular box was then, so it was made out of metal, steel, and completely packed. So probably welded together from all sides, so nothing could go in. There's no window, there's no way of air going in. And he says, we stood around observing that particular box. And after a few days, when we opened the box, the man was not alive, obviously, but we had not seen anything coming out of that box. So he says the conclusion is that the man died, but there is nothing that escaped his body, therefore the soul does not exist. Similarly, he said that when you say that good people go to Devlok, then my grandmother or my mother was very, very religious. She did all the good things, and in all ways she was very good, a very good person. But I'd asked her that if you go to Devlok, please come down and talk to me and tell me that something like this exists. But it's been many, many years since she's gone, and she hasn't come back. So I conclude that Devlok does not exist because I cannot see it, and there is no proof of that. So a lot of these concepts are similar. Your question is, we cannot see it, we cannot understand them, therefore we just have to accept them on faith, which is one way of looking at it. But the other way of looking at it is, who has actually given us this particular knowledge? What purpose would they have in saying something that was theoretical or developed out of imagination? And what was the background of or the power of those people? You understand where I'm getting
Yeah,
to?
yeah, because it's the Shastra which is written by, and they were Trikagnani, and
Yeah,
they could see everything, past,
yeah,
current, future, and tiniest place, and basically everywhere, not just on the earth. So obviously,
yeah,
from that knowledge, they've given us this knowledge.
yeah. So there are certain things that we will never have the power to actually see, but logically, a lot of these things actually make sense. And there are probably other deeper shastras which give more information and proof that may be available that I'm not aware of, I do not have the knowledge to explain. But I'm sure there are Guru Bhagwans who have a much deeper scientific background and who studied these things in greater depth. So, for example, the concepts of Jain geography, the knowledge there was something that one particular Acharya Maharaj spent many, many years researching. And I think he was instrumental in the concept of the Jambu Dvip, that is the particular institution that is in Palitana. They do different shows and explanations of Jain geography there on a regular basis. if you ever go there. So that whole thing was the product of one particular Acharya Maharaj who spent many years trying to explain to the world the truth about the geographical concepts that the Jain universe is describing. Okay.
Okay, bye.
Mm-hmm.
This is Hasmukh, yeah? I want to try and
Hi,
put
Smugbai.
this. I'm completely lost myself. Football's just thrown me completely. I want to try
Yeah.
and kind of put this in perspective and hope, well, I'm sure you'll help me. Basically, from what I understand, it's 6 dravyas make up the universe.
Yep.
So we've got 6 dravyas, and Pudgal is one of the dravyas. We've got Jeev,
Yes.
Ajeev. What have we got now? Hold on. We've got Jeev, Ajeev. Then we've got Dharma, Adharma, Akash, Pudgal, and Kal. Is that correct?
Yeah. Yeah. So Jeev is one, which is Jeev, that is life.
Yeah.
All the other 5 are Ajeev.
Huh.
So Jeev is one. Ajeev consists of Dharmastikai, Adharmastikai, Akasastikai, Pudgalastikai, and Kal.
So,
So
yeah, go on.
Jeev is one, then there are 5 others. So in
Yeah.
total, there are 6. You're
6
right.
dravyas. So that's basically the concept of the universe. So now
Yes.
and basically, so we're just looking at one of them. That's the Pudgal.
Yes.
And Pudgal
Yes.
is
Because
basically Pudgal is basically matter.
Pudgal is matter, and that is what everything that we see around us. It is that and or the combination of, so Pudgal and Jeev are parinami, meaning those are the only 2 dravyas that get together. Therefore, we see this combination of life, that is Jeev, the soul, which by nature is independent and free, is entrapped as a result of this Pudgal and its attachment to that Pudgal, and therefore takes up bodies here, there, and throughout the universe in the 4 gatis.
Yeah,
So
so go on.
that is why, yeah,
Sorry, go
and
on.
that is why it's important to understand the nature of Pudgal. And ultimately, if we go down more deeply into Adhyatmic understanding, our attachment to material things is by nature futile, because materials by nature are never permanent. And our desire is generally to seek permanence and a state of constancy where we are the happiest. And Adhyatmic understanding teaches us that that can only come from within yourself, because that is your nature. Everything else that you see around you, that you attach yourself to, that you consider as part of you, is by nature incomplete, by nature subject to change, by nature never permanent in the form in which you attach yourself to. So, for example, the body that you attach yourself to and identify with is going to grow up, grow old, and ultimately deteriorate, and ultimately get destroyed completely. So that body is not yours. Your associations with other people, because they are of similar bodies, that is also temporary. So everything that you get so worked up about is temporary, it's not yours, and these are the nature of all those things that you consider as yours. So that is why all this Pudgal in a finer form, what exactly is Pudgal is all this, but from the spiritual point of view, Adhyatmic point of view, studying this keeps on reminding us that by nature, all we are putting our faith in is material, which is completely alien to our own nature because we are immaterial.
And each individual unit of Pudgal is made up of many Parmanus. Are they?
Parmanu is
correct?
the smallest Pudgal. It is the smallest indivisible particle of Pudgal. And Parmanus get together to form what is called skands. Skands then Parmanu, 3 Parmanu, so 2 Parmanus. It is a Parmanu skand. And then they go on to become larger and larger skands. And then ultimately within a huge number of Parmanus and skands, when they get into certain kinds of very large uh, combinations of matter, then they are called Varganas. And what we just described was the 16 different types of Vargana, and out of which the finest is Karman Vargana. And that is what karma is made of, or karmic particles are made of. And when the soul does the particular activity and it engages with that which is not of its nature, then it attracts these particles of karma, which then incorporate into the soul because of this particular effort that the soul has made. And when they attach to the soul, then certain things about their future are determined at the time. So how big it is, when will it come to fruition, what is the nature of that karma, what particular kind of virtue of the soul will it obstruct, and when it comes to fruition, what sort of effect it will show. So those are all the things that the science of karma or karma granths teach us.
Well, okay, so it's kind of a twofold thing. The karma theory, it's like a separate thing. We understand the karma theory. We understand how we make karmas and how we build karmas.
Yeah.
And then this karma work is showing you the particles of those karmas that we have attracted, attached to our own souls.
Exactly.
And that tells us that when the soul, our soul is in this body. When the soul leaves this body, those karman particles that are still attached to the soul will go with the soul to the next body.
Absolutely. So the whole karma body goes along with the soul wherever it goes. Ultimately, when the soul goes to moksha, when all the karma particles have been shed off, then it is completely free of karma. And then it has it does not attach no karmas then attached to the soul, because it's completely independent and free, and it has reached a stage where further attachment of karmas is impossible, and that is moksha.
So here, the study of this basically is, I understand it. I don't know if I'm making it very simple, but at least that's the way I can kind of put it in perspective and in context for me. We're studying of these pudgals is just showing us the the particles that are attached to the soul and that travels with the soul, basically.
So we talk about karma vargana and karma pudgal, but in learning about that, we have started off with understanding what is Parmanu and what the different kinds of visible matter that we see around us and what are the qualities of those that matter. So we are learning about all those, But ultimately, in the context of the study of Nav Tatva, where we'll come to the concepts of ashrav, samvar, nirjara, bandh, and ultimately moksha, the emphasis is ultimately on the relation of karma to the soul, and what attracts karma, that is ashrav, what stops the influx of karmas, that is samvar, what how the karmas bind to the soul, that is bandh, and how the existing karmas are shed, that is nirjara, and ultimately when the soul is completely free of karmas, the state of the soul, that is moksha. So that is ultimately the further study, but we have come to this chapter on Pudgal to get to those further topics.
Thank you. That's kind of helped me quite a lot now. I understand, because I was just kind of all over the place when we were just talking about Putgal.
Yeah, I know. It is a bit more, and I think for some of us it's very interesting, but it is a subject matter, it's a study, and there are a lot of depths in that. And when we go deeper into it, all of it ultimately relates to many things that we read about or study in our sastras. But ultimately, the purpose of all knowledge is to gain the knowledge of oneself, to understand who one is as the soul and what is its ultimate goal. So that is ultimately the fruit of all knowledge.
And it's interesting how quickly when that happens, because I came across Kevli Kapil's story in the week.
Yeah, yeah,
And that just told me within a second how, what the change came in a second just by seeing a leaf drop.
yeah,
So yes,
yeah. So, and then it can happen like that, but ultimately these are changes that occur within. So thought is one level. Deeper than that, in the subconscious mind, and deeper than that, at the level of the soul, those changes need to take effect, and then progress can be very rapid.
So, Ajitbhai,
Yeah.
this is Nilma again. I'm so sorry to ask questions.
Don't worry, I welcome, and
Based
then
on what
I'll get
Asmukhbhai
results.
said,
Yeah.
so my understanding now is that Pudgal is technically a karma, if I
No,
want to
Pudgal
simplify
is
it.
one, karma is one kind of Pudgal. What we talked about are many different kinds of Pudgals.
Mm-hmm.
And there are, if you remember, I mentioned Audarik Sarir
Yeah.
Grahan Yogya Mahavargana. That is Pudgal. That is a Pudgal that can form. So that is a kind of Mahavargana, that is for Audarik Sarir. Then there is Vaikriya Sarir.
Mm-hmm.
Then there is Tejas Sarir. Then
Mm-hmm.
there is Swasoswas. There is Man. Then there is Karma. So these are all Pudgal.
But then doesn't it mean even the other types will eventually turn into karma, depending on how it affects
So that,
us?
that is why we are going deeper into the physics part of it.
Mm-hmm.
I mentioned that as you go from Audarik Sarir Agrahan Yogya Mahavargana
Mm-hmm.
to Karma Sarir Grahan Yogya or Karma uh, Karma Mate Grahan Yogya Mahavargana. So
Mm-hmm.
those Mahavarganas which are suitable for forming karmas, progressively from number 1 to number 16, and these are just examples. There are many, many Anant Mahavargana in between, but these are the 16 major ones. Progressively from 1 to number 16, so from Audarik Sarir Agrahan Yogya Mahavargana to Karma Grahan Yogya Mahavargana, the particles or the skans are getting finer and finer, but also denser and denser, meaning they are very, very tightly packed. And one of the examples that is given here is that if you got, say, a ton of cotton, then it would occupy a huge amount of space. But similarly, if you have got a ton of gold, then gold is much denser and it will occupy a much smaller space than a ton of cotton. So the particles that are present in gold are very, very tightly packed as compared to the particles that are present in the cotton, wool. So similarly, this is the example that's given, that we are going from one Mahavargana to the finer and finer and more dense and dense Mahavargana up to the level of Karma Vargana. Then we are looking at denser and denser Mahavarganas. So all this is happening invisible to us. So as we are sitting here, our soul is attracting karmas and they are constantly being attached to the soul. And for the last, all the Aishya karma that we have brought with us from the past life is being shed. So we have now all lost about an hour and a half of our Aishya karma, and that has been shed as we are living that particular time as we go along. Bijal, you had a question. Sorry, you raised your hand.
Pranam Ajitbhai.
Pranam.
So are these Parmanus always existent, but they just change form?
Yes,
So
exactly.
when we shed them, what happens?
When we shed them, like all material, so for example, we got painters painting our house. Slowly, the paint peels off, it disappears, it gets crushed under our feet and then forms a powder and that disperses in the air and material changes. Similarly, all matter changes. Our bodies get older. What we eat goes in as a salad, fruit, rotli, dal, bhat, shak, changes in many different forms material that the guts absorb and material that the gut does not absorb, and that is then shed out. So all those changes that occur in all the matter that we see around us, some matter lasts much longer. So the furniture that you and I have bought and it's sitting in our house, it may outlive us by many, many years. And you can
So,
see, yeah,
sorry.
go on.
So everything basically is here and will be here. It just changes form.
Absolutely. So there is no new material being produced by anybody. This is the nature of nature, basically, that everything has been here permanently, everything will be here permanently. It is just the changes within the matter and within the soul from the time it started. That is basically the what we see around us. So there's nothing new. Everything is absolutely been there all the time and will always be. It's never going to disappear. It's never been created and therefore it's not going to be destroyed.
And that's the Vishwa Vyavastha.
That is the Vishwa Vyavastha. That is
Okay.
the nature of the universe. There is
Thank you.
no karta, meaning that this was not something that was made possible by a supreme being. This is something that has always been and existed and will always exist.
Thank you.
Okay. So Sandeep and then Jayashri.
Yeah, a couple of these you mentioned can be seen in science, like darkness
Yeah.
and also the reflection in the mirror.
Mm-hmm.
So, for example, darkness, if you look at outer space, um, all the planets lined up and all that. And if you see the vibrations, cosmic vibrations,
Mm-hmm.
they occur because there is matter in the space. So basically the darkness covers that. So you can see that the darkness has matter.
Yeah.
Also with the reflection, light contains, it is like I mentioned, quark, and quark is a particle. So basically it's like a particle as well as, so light can be counted as particles in a way.
Yes. So light is light particle.
Yes, and the reflection is is like a reflection of the light. So if you look at a reflection in the mirror, that is a particle. So it's like a matter. So
Yeah.
the reflection is a matter.
Yeah.
So it can basically what you mentioned, that is Pudgal. So a couple of, I just wanted to mention that.
Oh, no, that's good. And
Science.
thank you very much for that, because then that makes sense, so that if our Sastakar Bhagwants have actually explained this long before any other scientific thinking actually came into being, either, if you look at the history of science. So all these things were explained long before that.
Yes. So I was just thinking about these two.
Yeah, no, it's good. Thank you very much. And appreciate your your background of engineering and physics. Thank you.
Okay.
Okay, and Jayshri, you had a question?
હા, પ્રણામ.
પ્રણામ.
એટલે હું પૂછતી હતી કે આપણે જે છે આ વર્ણ ગંધ રસ સ્પર્શ ને ઉદ્યોત નામ કર્મ ને આતપ નામ કર્મ ને એ સાંભળ્યું છે. તો આ શબ્દ ને અંધકાર ને પ્રભા ને છાયા એ પણ નામ કર્મ રિલેટેડ હોય?
ના, એટલે આ જે ઉદ્યોત નામ કર્મ, that is particular કે in relation to સૂર્યનું વિમાન અને સૂર્યકાંત રત્ન પાસે પોતે સ્થિત છે અને તેનો પ્રકાશ ઉષ્ણ છે. ચંદ્રાદિના ઉદ્યોતની જેમ આ આતપ પોતે પણ અનંત પૂતગલ સ્કંદનો સમુદાય પ્રતિ સમય સૂર્યના વિમાન સાથે જ પ્રતિબદ્ધ છે, તે છે. માટે બંને રીતે પૂતગલ રૂપ છે. હવે if you look at સૂર્ય સિવાયના ચંદ્ર વગેરે અંધકાર પ્રભા છાયા આતપ, સૂર્યનું વિમાન અને સૂર્યકાંત રત્ન પોતે સ્થિત છે પણ તેમનો પ્રકાશ ઉષ્ણ છે. હવે આ જે પર્ટિક્યુલર કાઇન્ડ ઓફ નામકર્મ છે, જે સૂર્યના વિમાનનું જે એકેન્દ્રિય જીવ છે એના શરીરના એના નામકર્મની વાત કરે છે.
એટલે ઉદ્યોત નામ કર્મ ને આતપ નામ કર્મ ખબર છે કે એ લોકોની બોડી એવી રીતે હોય. તો આ છાયા ને પ્રભા ને એ પણ કોઈ નામ કર્મ છે?
ના, ના, એ પૂતગલ જ છે. એ નામ કર્મ એટલે શું કે એ નામ કર્મને કારણે એ જીવનો એ પર્ટિક્યુલર
પ્રમાણે જન્મ
ના, એ પ્રમાણે એની ક્વોલિટી છે કે એ પ્રમાણે આપી શકે, કે એના એવા નામ કર્મથી એની બોડી એ રીતે એ રિલીઝ કરી શકે. પણ વોટ ઇટ ડઝ કે જે ઉદ્યોત ને એ છે એ પૂતગલ સ્વરૂપ છે. પણ જ્યાં એકેન્દ્રિય જીવ છે, અથવા તો આપણું જોઈએ કે આપણા નામકર્મના ઘણા બધા પ્રકારમાં આપણા બોડીનો શેપ, આપણા બોડીનો કલર, આપણી ચાલવાની ગતિ, એ બધા જુદા જુદા નામકર્મો છે. એને કારણે we have got that particular characteristic. So as a living being, all these characteristics of that particular living being are as a result of the nam karma. ઓકે, હવે છે તીર્થંકર નામ કર્મ. તીર્થંકર પરમાત્માને તીર્થંકર પણા સાથે જે બધું જોડાયેલું છે એ બધું તીર્થંકર નામ કર્મના કારણે મળ્યું.
ઓકે.
પણ એનું જે મેનિફેસ્ટેશન જે છે એ પૂતગલ સ્વરૂપ છે. એટલે આ જે અહીંયા જે ડિસ્ક્રિપ્શન છે રિલેટિંગ ટુ 2 ડિફરન્ટ થિંગ્સ. વન ઇઝ કે આ જે બોડીઝ આવા ઉદ્યોતને રિલીઝ કરે છે આતપ, એ બોડીઝ કેવી છે? તો એ કે એકેન્દ્રિય જીવ એના આ ટાઈપના નામકર્મને કારણે. પણ એનું જે મેનિફેસ્ટેશન સેના દ્વારા, વોટ ઇઝ ઇટ એકચ્યુઅલી conducted by, or what does it actually how does it, હવે આપણું શરીર છે, શરીર itself is પૂતગલ. આપણે શરીરમાંથી ચામડી થોડી કાપીને બહાર મૂકી દે તો that's not part of our body anymore. It is just dead matter, but it is still visible.
ઓકે. અને ઓલા આપણે સોરી, આ જે મોટી 16 વર્ગણા તમે કીધી એમના નામ મળશે?
હા, એ આપણે નેક્સ્ટ વીક પાછા આ ડિસ્કસ કરશું આપણે થોડુંક.
ઓકે. હા. થેન્ક યુ.
Okay. Good. We spent about half an hour or more on questions. Shall we end now?
Just a quick, I just want to mention something
Yeah.
from last week.
Yeah.
You mentioned Dharmastikai and Adharmastikai.
Yeah.
I just thought about those two. A few words came in my mind about gravity, friction, and inertia. I just wanted to let you know about, because that's what, from a scientific point of view.
Yeah, so those are all considered gravity, friction, inertia. Inertia is what is related to probably Adharmastikai. But exactly how that concept is explained, I mean, inertia is, if I understand, in relation to the nature of a body, what when it is still and not moving. Dharmastika is talking about that particular element that allows bodies to stay still.
Yeah.
And whether we call that as inertia, now inertia, as far as I understand, is a concept related to that particular body which is standing still. Whereas Adharmastikai is considered to be that element or that substance, or it's not actually a substance, but
It's a process.
It is a process.
Yes.
Which is throughout the universe.
Yes, inertia is like a process.
Okay, but it's a process related to a particular body.
Any body, yeah. So it allows a body to stop moving.
So, but it's considered to be a function of the body, not a function of the environment around it.
No, it is the environment.
It's the environment. Okay. So then inertia would then basically be considered to be similar to Dharmastikai. Adharmastikai.
Yeah.
And then so
gravity is the one for Dharmastikai, because that's the attraction. That's how the force is. There's a gravitational pull between the two bodies. Yeah.
So the ability, so that which allows bodies to move from one place to another is Dharmastikai. But what you're saying is that gravitational pull of all bodies is basically
will
allow that movement.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Well, that's good. So in terms of understanding these concepts, there are scientific.
It's not. There's no experiments on this, but it's just basically thought process.
Yeah. So but theoretical physics has come to these points, and these concepts are explained in Jain Dharma for forever. So they
Yeah.
have been present in the Shastras for a long time.
Yeah.
So gravity was not discovered by Newton. It's there. Okay. All right. Okay. Chinagna viruddh kaim bolyo ho te savihu manochan kai kari tasmichhami dukdam. If I've said anything that is against the teachings of our Tirthanga Paramatmas and our Shastras, I ask for forgiveness. Sarvamangala Mangalyam Sarkalyan Karanam Pradhanam Sarvadharmanam Janam Jeti Sasanam. Thank you all.
Thank you, Ajitbhai.
Thank you, Ajitbhai.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ajitbhai. Thank you.
Thank you all.
Thank you, Ajitbhai.
With Mira, I'll sign off as well.